And welcome in to PressBox Live. This is Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. Our special guest this week, you'll notice that the tall left-handed dude with the beard and the Oriole artwork behind him, or actually the baseball artwork behind him, is in here today. It's just me and my very special guest, old friend and longtime Oriole employee. He was the PR director of the team. He's been the alumni affairs director for going on, what, about 8 or 9 years, Bill Stetka?
Longer than that. We're going on 13, 14 years.
13, 14 years.
Yeah.
And also has the title as Orioles historian. And that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. I think people understand what a PR director does for a team or what the director of alumni affairs does to a certain extent. But the Oriole historian, does that just mean that you know a lot about the Orioles, or does that mean you had to study like for playing on Jeopardy to know all the answers, Bill?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one, I'm sort of the de facto historian. I don't have that as part of my title, but everybody comes to me for answers on different questions, whether it's what was the ticket prices in 1965 or what number did this guy wear? I become the go-to guy. Some of it, Stan, as we go back a long ways. I saw my first Oriole game in 1961. So, growing up here, being an Oriole fan, seeing 20 to 40 games a year in my youth, and then covering the team as a sports writer. I certainly became ingrained in, everything Orioles. As you get into working for the club, you learn more things in depth.
I would imagine as PR director, every year was your task, whether you were John Maroon's assistant,
right,
or when you had to put out that book every year, the media guide,
right,
which is quite an endeavor, and it must have reverberated that knowledge you had. It just became fully ingrained in you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, between the media guide and the daily game notes that you put out for the media, if it was something I didn't know off the bat, it was something that you had to research and look up, and that sometimes would trigger something else and recall and things like that. So there's a lot of that. I mean, the years as a fan, as a sports writer, multiplied by the years as a PR director, multiplied by my role in alumni in researching and looking up information about players that I don't know personally.
Yep.
So if you're going to call them, you want to know something about them. So you go and research them, and you find out tidbits here and there. You find out somebody that held a record you didn't even know existed, little things like that. So, it all kind of compounds, and I guess it starts as a basis as being a big fan.
Yep.
And then you learn more and more and more, and hopefully, I mean, like I said, I'm sort of the go-to person. So if it's kind of when I get a call from Orioles customer service, somebody's got a question. If I don't know it, I know where to find it.
Jim Henneman.
Yeah, well, Henny, I've called on Henny several times.
I'm sure you have, and I'm sure
because it'll be like, do I have this right?
Yep.
Am I recalling this correctly?
And I'm sure the late Bob Brown was somebody you could call in the past.
Yeah, Bob was the longtime PR director for the Orioles, spent 37 years in the organization.
Right.
Both are, among my mentors, along with John Stedman, the old News American sports editor. So yeah, I mean, they were resources to call on and just say, am I remembering this correctly? Or do you know where, like Bob, especially, do you know where I might find this?
Yeah.
Things like that. So now, I've become the Bob Brown. So they come to me with, where
Yeah.
do I find this, or what's the answer? Um, and I like the arcane and the digging into things, the digging into history, coming up with a new twist on something. I write some stories for the Orioles website, and it's fun delving into things and recalling the things that I've experienced,
Where do you
over
find
60 years now.
where do you find in today's age on the internet? Do you find that the internet makes it really easy for you to research? It seems so many times when I have an arcane bit of knowledge, my way of asking the question of Google or on Google, it doesn't get me to exactly where I want. Do you feel like you've got that down?
Uh, to some extent. Now, some of the newer websites,
Yeah,
baseballreference.com in particular, um, you can query certain things on there, and I'm not, I'm far from a website expert.
right, right.
I mean, I sometimes have to go to our younger kids in PR now and say, all right, I'm trying to ask this, and it's not coming out, you know? So, um,
Yeah, my wife knows nothing about baseball, but if you put her on the job of looking up somebody's number, how many home runs Gus Zernial hit in 1950s, she'll find it.
oh
She'll
yeah.
find it. Yeah.
Well, and that kind of thing is something that's easy. Back in what I mean, and I'm only going back. It's I left PR in 2008, so we're talking 13 years ago.
Right.
But back at that time, when we were in PR and we were doing research on something, we were sending our interns scurrying to our basically our box score books,
Uh-huh.
or our yearly summaries, to see when was the last time somebody did this. Did somebody ever do this? Nowadays you can query it and they can come up with it in a couple
It,
minutes.
yeah.
Um, or we used to call Stats Inc. or you'd call it the Elias Sports Bureau, and you know they can come up with it. But even back in our day, the way they had to pose the questions and come up with things on their databases,
Yeah.
it might take. I mean, you want to give this to the media, you know, by like the next half inning. And sometimes they'd say, well, we can get it to you within a couple hours. Well, the game's
Right.
over by then,
Yep.
so it becomes a note for the next day, unless your interns can come up with something much quicker, So
So,
nowadays, so many things come so much quicker that you can query. I mean, I've spent some time looking at things the old fashioned way, and come to find out, somebody in PR has already done it. And
so let me ask you a question. This one was asked of me the other day on the Bat Around with Paul Valley, who's doing a good job hosting my old show. And it was, where do you put Cedric Mullins' season? This is not asking for a literal answer, but where do you put it statistically in the history of the ball club? And I said, you got to probably start with Frank Robinson's 66 Triple Crown season, Gentile, Cal Ripken's MVP season. And then after that, I'm sure Eddie Murray's got some years that are way better
yeah,
than Cedric Mullins.
Brady's year,
Brady's 50
you
50
know,
home run
um,
season. But this has got to be a pretty unique one, isn't it? His
oh,
30
absolutely,
30.
yeah. It's among hitters, it's got to rank in the top 10.
That's what I said, 8 to
Um,
10.
you know, I'd have to, you know, look at that a little closer to figure out exactly where, but
Right.
um, I certainly think it would be in the top 10. Um, and it could be 6, 7. I don't, like I
Yeah.
said, I'd have to look at that.
Yeah.
When you throw the pitchers into the mix,
Yeah.
you
This
know,
was only offensive
yeah,
players,
yeah,
but
the offensive players, it's another, it ranks pretty up there, you know, and what you know, I don't totally subscribe to WAR. I think there's some things missing in that. You look at the numbers that Lee May put up.
right.
back in the 70s, with, 25 homers and 98 to 100 RBIs. And his WAR numbers were not that strong. And I don't know how that can be, on clubs that were making it to the playoffs a number of those years. So I think sometimes the WAR numbers are skewed. Although, I'll use the good numbers when I have to in a story.
Right. Right. So the being the club historian de facto or not, it's something you enjoy, isn't it? You take
absolutely.
a great deal of ownership of knowing the product that you work around.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I enjoy when there's something I recall and there's something going on in a game, and I can text our PR person at the scene and say, think about this, or look this up, because I know they can look it up quicker than I can, but I remember this happening. And I used to love, the late great Mike Flanagan and Mike would come to me and say, "Hey, do you remember this?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And I'd get him a factoid that he could use on the air.
And he'd take it and unravel the thread.
And he would run with it and just, and it makes you feel good that you've done that.
We know that the job's important. You and I do. Do you think there's an appreciation from the younger members of PR today? And I'm not just talking about Oriole PR. I mean, anywhere, Detroit, Kansas City, that they respect what people like you and I might know? Or do they think that they think, I'm not really interested in that?
No, I think they recognize it. They because I get calls from them.
Yep.
I mean, if they slough me off, if they said, "Yeah, we got it," don't worry, we got it, then I'd feel that way. But no, I mean, I'm in great contact with these guys and gals that are in our PR department. They
So that's a good feeling for you to know that they care about today's product with that kind of, because it's a caring about the product.
Oh, absolutely. It's caring about the history of the ball club and the product, and not just about what's, the 25 guys that are on today's roster.
Right.
It's what went on before and how does it all relate.
So now that's an inside look at an organization. To today's fans, do you think they can get the appreciation of the game the way we did when we were their age, Bill? And I'm talking about 20s and 30s, because the game has gotten so stat happy, and it's not a criticism of it. It's just so stat happy. Sometimes I wonder if people, average fans, can just appreciate the game for the game.
It's a good question, especially as we get into, more of the, the DraftKings and FanDuel and all of that, it keeps more people engaged, which is a good thing.
Yep.
I'm not sure how many, it's funny. I go back, one of my best friends is a lifelong Red Sox fan. He's in his 70s. He used to sit at Fenway with 6,000 people in the ballpark. And he was so joyous in 2004 when they won it for the first time.
Right.
But after that, he got so pissed off at the Johnny come latelys who
took it away from.
They didn't know who Tony Canigliaro was.
Right.
And if it didn't happen just then, it really rankles him to this day. They think we've got this great glorious history and that we're all that. He goes, the Yankees have us beat 10 times over.
Right.
And this is a diehard Red Sox fan talking.
Yeah.
So, from that kind of standpoint, um, it's funny too, because when I sit in the stands, it's hard sometimes for me to hear what other people are saying, because it's like, I know what you're saying is wrong, but I'm not going to chime in to correct it. I don't want to be that guy.
Right. Right.
Um, so it becomes difficult. And then if I have, like, in our kind of employee section, where that could be friends of employees, but it could be an employee saying, "Bill, what about that?" And it's kind of like, well, I'm forced to answer it now. So, but
Hey,
I enjoy it. I enjoy the give and take and the camaraderie with them. And if I can impart some knowledge to them without being obnoxious, and I never say something obnoxiously,
right.
I hope, but if I can at least, you know, prod them in the right direction, I feel like I'm doing everybody a service.
Hey, with the new Oriole broadcast team that's come into clearer focus over the last couple of years, with Fred leaving and then Joe Angel leaving,
Yeah.
with Kevin Brown here, Ben, of course, played for the team.
Yes.
Then
Yeah.
you have Brett Hollander, who knows Baltimore sports very well. But Jeff Arnold worked his way up through the
Melanie
minor
Newman.
leagues.
Yeah.
And oh
Melanie.
God, Melanie
Yeah.
Newman, who does a
Yeah.
really nice job. Do you find that they lean on you, the newer people, to help them with the history, or do you
Yeah.
think they study it enough themselves?
Yeah. A couple of them, I get some text or a call from a couple of them. I think some are they're working through PR.
Yep.
Um, we're, so, if anybody asks for my help, I'm more than happy, but I'm not going to impose myself.
Gotcha.
They, I think they all know I'm a resource. I've had some great conversations with several of them. Um, you know, there, with given the pandemic, we're not at the ballpark. I'm not at the ballpark every night
Right.
like I would be normally. In a normal season, we're a couple nights a week. We have 3, 4 players out doing autographs before a game.
Alumni things. Yep.
We have a player doing suite visits. So I'm there, and I would see them more regularly. The last 2 years, you know, I'm not there. Last year, obviously, nobody was there. This
Yep.
year, you know, we were restricted in what we could do, where we could go. So, I'm basically, I went to about, I don't know, 16, 18 games as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I didn't have the same access to them, and as I said, I'm not gonna, call each one of them and say, hey, if you need something. They know they've got PR. If PR needs me, so, you know, but I do, I've had chats with them. I've had chats with some of the writers. Um,
Because I imagine
yeah,
for a young broadcaster, it's interesting. I've covered the Orioles and been a fan like you, but I've covered them since 1981, essentially. There's a lot of stuff I know. If I was thrust into, if I suddenly was catapulted to Cincinnati, I was on part of a broadcast
oh,
team,
yeah.
I'd know this season that I'm in, but I wouldn't have all the historical perspective. That's what I guess I'm alluding to.
Yeah. And I think that, um, you know, I would hope that what we've been able to put into the media guide, and what, but between myself and the PR team, um, thrust into the game notes in terms of, historical context of different, this date in Orioles history, where this guy ranks, you know, in club history. I would hope that all of those things, um, make it easier for the broadcasters and the writers.
Yep.
I'm a former writer myself, so, um, but they're also that there's, I guess, other than like Ben being a former player, to recall a specific game or incident, you know, it's harder for the other broadcasters to do that.
Yeah.
That without, that they're not going to be able to delve into it that deeply anyway. So, if we give them the, the top line on it, I think they're fine.
When they ask you,
And I listen to the broadcast, and I think they do, a good job with it.
yeah, they do, but you're right. It's studying that media guide, and then if you have questions that come out of reading that, going to PR, but then using you as a source.
Yeah,
I wonder-
I went through, as an example too. I went through. I had put together, back when I started in the alumni department, this date in Orioles history, updating it through. There have been some books that have, Ted Patterson had done
Ted
a book.
Patterson wrote a
others,
couple,
and-
yeah.
Well, so I went through and updated it, giving significant things that happened on this date. And we basically had it through the season. Well, during the pandemic last year, I went through and I said, I'm going to take it from January 1 to December 31. Now, obviously, you don't have games a lot of this time, but
Sure.
I added basically every Oriole player's birthday
Okay.
in club history. Significant deaths, trades, manager hirings, GM hire, anything that happened on a particular date. And
And that's that's a never ending task, isn't it?
Oh, and every year I update it.
Yeah.
This in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be going through and looking at the 21 season and seeing what do I need to add. John, I've already added John Means no hitter.
Sure.
But what other dates, award winners, things like that need to be added. And the amazing thing was I got down to like, they're maybe not the most significant trades in Orioles history, but I found something for every date in the calendar,
That's amazing.
including February 29th.
Hey, I wanted to ask you one other thing. We're not going to get into alumni affairs tonight, and that'll be for another time. But
All
I did want to ask you a question. You've been around the game a long time, like me. And if you ask a question about diversity, and I'm speaking specifically of women, you and I probably remember Helen Conkling being in the back, smoking her cigarettes, and talking to Bob Brown. And she was a valued member of the team. And I remember Lucy Kelly early in her days with the ball club. But today, there's a lot of females involved. Do you find that they just start out thinking, boy, that would be neat to work for a ball club? Or do you think they really have a love for the game and a full understanding of the game that's equal to the men?
Well, that it's kind of a loaded question, Stan.
Yep.
You have to have a love for the game to work in baseball or in any sport, because they're not 9-to-5 jobs.
No, you've got to have
Far
above and beyond passion.
Yeah.
For it.
You have to understand like the position you're in. If you're in public relations, it's more about public relations than it is about knowing baseball. If you're in community relations, it's about dealing with community organizations, and then getting your players to buy in or to assist in your efforts and coming up with programs. So it's the programming that fits, not just, I used to say in PR, like I would have so many, men and women, college students who would come through. Hey, I know every Oriole player's number. I know what Frank Robinson's numbers were in '66. I'm like, you know what? You can look that up.
Right.
How are you at writing a press release?
Right.
How are you with dealing with people? How are you with dealing with the media? Those are the important things. You're not going to be starstruck walking in.
Yep.
You're not going to be starstruck walking into the clubhouse. So those are the key things. So I really think um, the the women who are in the positions that I see and work with in PR,
Yeah,
in community relations, um, they get it. They understand what it's about, and they they know the game well enough. It doesn't mean they have to know all the intricacies, because guess
right.
what? There are people in baseball operations,
That don't know all
men
the,
who don't know all the intricacies.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's just that's how intricate the sport is,
yeah.
basically.
It's,
Um,
it's
but I think if a woman doesn't come in with a love of the game
right.
and but a knowledge of their area, you know,
They're not
they're
going to
no
make
different
it
than a
just
man.
like a man. Right.
They're
Exactly.
no different than a man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I say, I mean, um, we have look, we've got one of two uh, female groundskeepers in Major League
Yep.
Baseball, Nicole Sherry,
PA announcer now, a
PA
play-by-play
announcer,
announcer. Yep.
broadcaster, our our PR department. I can't even go through everything because we have a lot of women, in our you know in key positions in our front office, and I think that's a good thing.
I
I
think it
really do
is
think
too.
it's a good
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
It's not just you know it's not just the old boys club.
No, it's not. It really isn't. And I think it's for the good of the game. You hired, if I'm not mistaken, you hired Monica Barlow to be your assistant, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
Yes, I did.
Monica Pence Barlow, who passed away of lung cancer. It's
Yeah.
been what, six or 7 years ago now.
Oh gosh, this would have been 2014.
12, 14, so it's 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And she
Monica.
became, yeah, she
No,
replaced you when you stepped down. And
yes,
she was, I think was she the first PR director, a female PR director in baseball?
not in baseball, but
Okay,
for the Orioles,
for
certainly.
the Orioles.
Um, uh, and Monica, I had told Monica several years before that, um, you will replace me one day. She was good. She understood public relations, which, as I said, that's the key. Understanding public relations, how to deal with the media. The thing in public relations is you've got the players on one side, you got the media on the other, and you got the front office on the other. You got three sides that you're trying to make happy. And you can't make all three of them happy
At the same time. Yeah. Yeah.
There's no way you can do that.
Yeah.
And
Monica walked that line very well.
yes, she
She
did.
really did.
Yes, she
Yeah.
did. And when the day came when they asked me to start the player alumni program in 2008, and they named Monica, I was like a proud papa.
I know you will. I know you were. That's a good spot for us to stop tonight, but I'd love to get you on again, maybe during the off season, and talk about what you do for alumni affairs, because it's an important aspect of the Baltimore Orioles, and they do it about as well as anybody in the game.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And we didn't start. We were behind the eight ball a little bit when we
Yep.
started,
Yep.
but not as far as a lot of other clubs. And
It's a missing aspect of of the game of baseball. I
yeah,
don't think all the teams. I don't
yeah,
think all the teams do a good job at it.
yeah, and I'm proud to say that with some of the programming that we've started and what we've been able to do over the years, I've had teams from not only baseball but other sports, contact me to ask how we do what we do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's that makes me feel good too. But we could, be more than happy to jump on again.
We'll do that before spring training starts this year, and let's keep our fingers crossed it starts on time.
Yes,
Bill, My best to you and Alex. I appreciate the time. I'm a little early, but happy Thanksgiving and a happy holiday season.
You too, Stan. Best to you
And
and Jane.
and go Ravens and go Orioles.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Gary Stein and I here Wednesday night with our old friend Andy Dolich from the left coast and Marty Conway from the right coast, talking about the sport, the business of sports. Talk to you soon, Bill. Thanks.
All right, Stan.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.